No auge da guerra, o governo norte-americano realizou várias operações clandestinas e inúmeros testes com bombas nucleares na região das Ilhas Marshall, na zona ocidental do Oceano Pacífico.
If you could ever call anything a weapon of mass destruction, the hydrogen bomb is a weapon of mass destruction.
Um grupo de militares norte-americanos escolhidos a dedo jurou segredo durante o seu serviço a bordo de um navio desconhecido para preparar testes nucleares clandestinos de alto rendimento, cujo nome de código era Operação Castelo.
Our job as a nation was to do two things at the same time. Priority number one is scare the hell out of the Russians, and at the same time keep everybody calm in our country.
A 1 de março de 1954, o destacamento de segurança dos Marines a bordo do USS Curtis testemunhou a Bravo Shot, que continua a ser a maior detonação nuclear norte-americana da história.
Curtis was called the ghost ship just because they didn't know where it was.
The day of the shot, we were all brought out on the main deck. We're sitting on the deck with our faces in our arms, like this.
When they call the countdown, it'd be H minus
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and nothing. Nothing. Then all of a sudden, boy, that light hit.
They expect boom, no sound, just heat.
That one bomb alone would incinerate 80 million people.
It still is vivid in my memory. I'm going to see something that could have a fantastic, devastating consequence. I want to remember it and hope that I never see it again.
Durante mais de 50 anos, os Marines atómicos foram obrigados a manter o sigilo sobre a sua experiência nesta operação extraordinária e ultra-secreta. Esta é a sua história. A bomba atômica foi desenvolvida por cientistas que trabalhavam no Projeto Manhattan, dirigido pelo Laboratório Nacional de Los Alamos, no Novo México, o local de origem da bomba atômica. Pertencendo aos Estados Unidos, a ilha de Tinian, nas Ilhas Marianas, foi uma das maiores bases aéreas durante a Segunda Guerra Mundial. A pista do Campo Norte, a pista Able, foi o ponto de partida do bombardeiro B-29 Enola Gay.
My name is Don Farrell. I live here on the island of Tinian, and I chose this little island of Tinian to be my home. And then I built on the story of the arrival of the first American naval contingent that took command of the island and their Marines. And living here on Tinian, and only 15 minutes from the atomic bomb pits, I decided I wanted to write a story about Tinian and the bomb. It is here that the USS Indianapolis arrived on July 26, 1945, carrying the casing for Little Boy 11 as it was being loaded into the Enola Gay up at Northfield. It was loaded into the truck, taken up to the atomic bomb assembly area, put inside of a building there in a special platform, and then into the bomb and to the bomb pits.
Durante a Segunda Guerra Mundial, a 6 de agosto de 1945, o Enola Gay lançou a bomba atômica sobre Hiroshima. Conhecida como Little Boy, a bomba atômica de urânio foi a primeira a ser usada em território estrangeiro.
The Manhattan Project, of course, was America's best kept secret. At the time that this event took place, it surprised the world. It certainly surprised the Japanese, and it certainly surprised the Soviet Union, who knew we had an atomic bomb project going on, but didn't realize how close to reality we were. One of the most critical elements that America established at the very beginning of this war with Japan was every minute counts. Because the objective was to get it over with, force the Japanese to surrender, bring our boys home, and start the American economy again. General Tibbets visited here, and we went down there, and he showed me how he turned the Enola Gay around at the very end of the runway so he had every foot of available runway in front of him, knowing that he had more people on board than usual, more fuel on board than usual, and a far bigger bomb. This was the test of whether or not they could end the war with the atomic bomb.
Quando a Segunda Guerra Mundial finalmente terminou, depressa surgiu uma nova disputa. A corrida ao armamento nuclear intensificou-se, originando uma forte rivalidade entre as duas novas superpotências mundiais.
One day they called me into a little room and there were two gentlemen in suits sitting behind a desk and asked me different questions about where I was from, what I did in school, and different things like that. I had no idea what they were doing, and they asked me for references. We met with somebody where we had to be sworn in for something for secrecy.
Sediada na costa do sul da Califórnia, a Sea School, localizada no centro de recrutamento dos Marines, é uma das maiores bases dos Marines nos Estados Unidos. Marines escolhidos a dedo entre os melhores do seu curso foram selecionados para participar numa série de missões altamente confidenciais durante a Guerra Fria. O capitão Brenneman liderava o destacamento de segurança clandestino a bordo do USS Curtis e ajudou a escolher alguns desses Marines de elite.
Captain Brenneman came in to interview us. I knew that something was different, but I didn't know what. I was just a good Marine, you know, private first class, did exactly what they said, and that's what I tried to do.
They didn't tell us why, but one by one we went in, and I answered the questions the best I could. Evidently, I was picked. So after graduation, I was assigned to the Curtis. Of course, we had no idea what was ahead of us, and nobody would tell us anything except, you know, just seagoing duty.
Os Marines a bordo do USS Curtis tornaram-se membros de uma força de segurança confidencial da Comissão de Energia Atômica. Para os que participaram nestas missões, o USS Curtis ficou conhecido como um navio fantasma que nunca existiu.
At the time we were in Sea School, we had a couple of officers come in and they just asked us questions, and that was to get our secret clearances. Our duty was standing watch and guard, security. We had charge of securing the atomic bomb. It was actually the hydrogen bomb.
I signed up for ski school and wanted to. When I did, they then approached me and talked to me about doing this type of duty. They then had security people, I guess the FBI, did a questionnaire on me. They did an investigation. I had family and friends tell me that they'd come by and question them and put them through the third degree.
We really didn't know what we were going to do. They said it was going to be something that was important, and that became kind of exciting because we wondered, I know I wondered what it was going to be like.
The only time we had any idea is when they called us all in the room, one at a time, and they said there'd be a gentleman in there, we'll ask you some questions. He said, well, if we ask you not to talk about anything while you're in the service, would you have any problem with that? And I said, no, sir, I wouldn't have any problem with that. So I went to sign him, and he says, I need to tell you something before you sign those papers. You do realize you're signing away your rights. And I looked at him and I said, rights? I'm in the Marine Corps. I don't have any rights anyway. And he laughed. But he said, I need to tell you one other thing about the Rosenbergs. Now, that was the only tip-off I ever had. It might be something to do with nukes.
O infame caso Rosenberg tornou-se dos julgamentos de espiões mais conhecidos da história norte-americana. Julius e Ethel Rosenberg foram condenados por espionagem e executados por partilharem segredos atômicos com os russos durante e após a Segunda Guerra Mundial.
I was sent to an officers' naval training school to be the instructor for our group on the ship. So I think that was the first time that I realized maybe there was something happening different.
I did not know about the top secret clearances until our badges were issued. And I don't think our badges were issued until after we signed the information forms. Once we signed those, and then I believe they started assigning the security clearances, then we started our operations.
Foi dito aos Marines selecionados para servir no USS Curtis que teriam o mesmo destino: Se fossem divulgados pormenores da sua missão, seriam condenados por conspiração para levar a cabo espionagem e punidos com a pena de morte.
My God, we're handpicked. We're supposed to be the best of the Marine Corps at that particular time and for this particular mission. We did find out that we were going over there and we were going to be the security guard for the hydrogen bomb test. And we knew that some of them were being assembled aboard our ship.
When we left San Diego, we were all ushered into a great big hangar deck and met by an FBI agent who told us basically that we were now super duper top secret people, and from then on, anything you see, hear, or think you see or hear, you don't talk about.
At that time, my duties were varied. I spent a lot of time on orderly duty, and I stood orderly for 4 admirals, 2 ships captains, and a commanding officer. But the reason I got that job, part of it, is I didn't tell people what I heard. And there's a tremendous bond between the admirals and the captains and their orderlies. They have to know that what they say will never leave that room.
They said that people had been executed for talking about top secret secrets, and that we would probably wind up in Leavenworth if we did talk about it. And that was, we got the message.
Depois da Segunda Guerra Mundial, USS Curtis foi convertido para ser usado nos testes atômicos no atol de Bikini.
And the Curtis was called the ghost ship just because they didn't know where it was.
O Curtis era um porta-hidroaviões e o seu interior foi convertido em segredo num laboratório de armas atômicas que albergava a tripulação do navio, cientistas atômicos e todo o pessoal militar de topo e uma carga ultra-secreta.
The Curtis was not necessarily a clandestine ship as far as we were concerned. We were aboard the Curtis as a naval vessel. The Curtis was a little different in that we carried more officers and some of the scientists. And I think that the scientists were aboard the ship and they sensed that they wanted more security. And I don't think that they sensed that the Navy was giving them any security. In other words, I was on the Master Arms Force and I carried a 45 and all, but I didn't appear to be enough security for the people that were coming aboard the ship. They wanted a Marine contingent aboard that ship.
We really didn't know at the degree of secrecy until we went to pick up the weapons. And all of a sudden we realized what's going on here, because boy, they put the lid on. We wanted to port Chicago. We still didn't know what the weapons were. We still didn't know. We were starting to get a pretty good idea because they were in these big crates and all that. But I mean, we had like at least 4 layers of security. And most of the security things, you go up to 3, you got a hot spot. And a lot of them have 1. We had about 4. And we also found out there are people there other than us in the security. And that was FBI was there and everybody was there. When I really realized how serious something must be is when we left to go wherever we were going to go. Nobody said you're going to go to the Marshall Islands. We had no idea. The only thing we did know, wherever it was going to be warm because of the uniforms.
Then we left from Port Chicago after getting all the information and things we needed. Off we go to Hawaii. That was about a 7-day trip, and then from Hawaii on to Bikini Atoll.
Since I'm from the Bay Area, I only remember 2 or 3 times that the Golden Gate Bridge was ever closed. But when the USS Curtis went under the bridge, there were men, 2 on each side of the bridge, that were actually waving at the Curtis as it went by. And later I found out that they were FBI agents and that the bridge had been closed for the passage of the Curtis.
The FBI or whoever researched our clearances, wow, so this must be really important. But I didn't know the mission until we left Pearl Harbor. Then I knew where we were going.
We were drilled to the fact that you do not say anything at all. Don't mention the islands, don't mention, well, we never knew the device. but don't mention the island, don't mention how many ships were in our task force, the types of visitors, the VIPs, which were physicists from California, Berkeley, and of course, New Mexico.
The Korean War just ended. So the Cold War, as we know it now, wasn't really in anyone's mind. But I started to say one of the things that just really hit home for me was when we were out there on the ship once, and that's when this Russian submarine was tailing us. And all of a sudden, it's who's pushing a button, and you got real tense. And you realized that it could be a war right there, that moment. Again, I can't say it was a Cold War mentality that came into my mind, but it was a realization that we were there for something different than just out there having fun.
Ed Smith tornou-se cartunista profissional e o seu amigo próximo, Bob Mackenzie, tinha também o passatempo de desenhar cartoons enquanto servia a bordo do USS Curtis durante a Operação Castelo. Juntos relatariam e registariam as suas experiências.
As a kid, my brother and he's an artist too, and we would draw all over the walls of our bedroom. But that's something we just fell into. And Bob Mackenzie and I would do some little cartoons, so it was just a natural thing.
Quando a Guerra da Coreia terminou, começou verdadeiramente o que ficou conhecido como Guerra Fria. A tensão que tinha surgido após a Segunda Guerra Mundial entre a Rússia e os Estados Unidos aumentou drasticamente, à medida que ambos os lados se concentravam no domínio estratégico.
When I really realized how serious something must be is when we left to go wherever we were going to go. Nobody said you're going to go to the Marshall Islands. The first night out, and I remember I was on orderly duty. I remember how quiet those ships are at night, and actually eerie, frankly. They're really eerie because there's nobody moving around much, but we were under full wartime conditions.
That's when we knew we weren't alone. There was a Russian sub under us, and they tracked that.
We guarded that ship from stem to stern like it was our own castle, you know, well, pardon the pun. They knew the importance, they knew that what they had to do, and they knew the consequences if this ever got in the wrong hands.
My duties aboard there were basically security, and when we were at sea, we were looking for frogmen, we were looking for bubbles in the water, submarines. We knew they were there. We were very close to the bomb. And these were experiments, basically. They really didn't know how powerful these bombs were. But we were in a major campaign to defeat the Russians in developing weapons of mass destruction.
A Operação Castelo levou a cabo vários testes de intensidade diferente. O derradeiro objetivo da operação era testar a concepção de uma arma termonuclear que pudesse ser lançada de uma aeronave.
We knew that the Russians were being kept from, we were told that the Russians were all around us, they said out there, trying to see what we were doing. And we were just to make sure that if we saw someone or someone was trying to come aboard, whatever it was, that we would be there to protect the scientists. The bombs were stored in a ship's armory, and we would hand carry them from the ship up to the deck to take them to the barge.
There would be 4 or 5 or 6 of us would go to this barge and pull duty. That was where the scientists were, and we ate with the scientists, and we slept aboard there. We were going to be gone like 3 days and 2 nights. 2 men on duty at a time, one at the entrance of the barge and the other one walking around the bomb. While we were at if it was supper, dinner, breakfast table, they were sitting across from us there, and somebody asked them what we could expect, the power of this thing. And he says, well, you take, you have a stick of dynamite, which is the explosive, but you have to have the cap to set the dynamite off. Okay, he says, you're going to take one of these bombs that was dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that will be the cap on the dynamite. That's how much stronger they were looking at.
These are sketches of the trip on an LST between Eniwetok and Bikini Atoll. Carried the shrimp device, the Bravo shot, though at the time we didn't know it was the Bravo shot. I just happened to be one of 5 Marines that were with Captain Brannaman, who we boarded an LSD, and we carried the Bravo device to an island. It was Nam Island. Nam was just a simple man-made island. It was about a few hundred feet off of the Nam Island. This was a little artificial island, and on that they had the Bravo shot cab, which is where we put the device.
And when we walked around this bomb, you could see the water. The water was around there, it was around it and stuff like that. So it was just anchored by an island. It just looked like a big propane tank, and I guess it was a bomb.
About what, 5 feet in diameter, maybe 15, 20 feet long. And stainless or titanium, whatever metal they had at that time, it was light. We didn't realize what was going to happen, how big it was.
We really didn't know when the next bomb was going to be. We had no idea of the size, and as we know now after reading declassified documents, they had not an idea what size it was going to be. And so it was all experimental.
I was still nervous before the first bomb went off, not knowing what was going to happen. I know that it's anticipation, but anything you do, anticipation is the best part of something you're involved in. Well, this was, to me, was what's going to happen when this thing goes off. You know, we're told to close our eyes and not look. Is it going to hurt us? Is it going to destroy the ship? You know, we didn't know. So the anticipation of the first shot was phenomenal.
A 1 de março de 1954, os Estados Unidos efetuaram a maior detonação nuclear de sempre, a Castle Bravo, no atol de Bikini, nas Ilhas Marshall. O Bravo foi o primeiro teste da Operação Castelo.
If you could ever call anything a weapon of mass destruction, the hydrogen bomb is a weapon of mass destruction. We were the closest ship, I believe, to the actual detonation.
The day came that they were going to light the candle, and we steamed out to sea, and this thing went off, and of course it was totally unexpected.
We were all brought out on the main deck aft and told to face away from the blast. We're sitting on the deck with our faces in our arms, you know, like this.
It was before the sun came up, and we all sat down and got into our positions. When they call the countdown, it'd be H minus
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and nothing. Nothing. Then all of a sudden, boy, that light hit.
When the blast went off, you literally could see the bone in your arm. And I mean, you had your eyes closed, and we didn't know what to expect when that thing went off. If you looked at that thing, you were going to go blind, and there was no question after it went off, the intensity of that light. This was just at daybreak, so it's dark out there beside.
When the Bravo one, the big one went off, I thought it was going to burn the back of my neck. It got so hot. And the light came through. Like when you were a kid, you take a flashlight and put it under your fingers. You couldn't see blood running, but you could see through your fingers.
Then the frustrating part was the officers and the sergeants had goggles, and so they were watching the whole thing, and they were describing it to each other, you know. And one was remarking, "It's boiling."
When they detonated that first sucker, they didn't have to tell you. With your eyes closed, you could see it. Much brighter than the sun. It was so frightening, so scary. But you look, and the whole horizon left with the most magnificent colors you've ever seen. I've never in my life seen anything like that. It was all the colors unimaginable. And it just kept boiling and boiling.
And Jesus, God. And then I saw the mushroom cloud come up over the horizon, the multicolors in the bomb of itself like an inferno. But I mean, it was supposed to have been a little over 6 megatons, and it turned out to be 2.5 times that big. You know, and some people could have been seriously hurt, injured, or whatever, because You're sitting there, you're putting your heads into your arms and all that, and all you can see is skeletons in there. And then all of a sudden you're allowed to open your eyes and you're looking over here for the mushroom, and the damn thing's over above you already.
And it's interesting because as a fireball goes up, it's burning the atmosphere and creating a vacuum. And when it gets about halfway up, all of a sudden you'll see this zoop from below. It's just shooting up in it. And when you see photographs and there's a little flange or something in the stem of the mushroom cloud, that's where the two have joined together. And then as it gets up high, way above the clouds, then ice crystals start forming, flowing down over it.
The realism of what the heck happened didn't really come into play until you got up and you turned around, and it was just like, oh my God, you know, just beautiful, devastating.
But then the heat started hitting. And that was more scary than the light. And so as the light was building up, that's when we first hear people running. And I don't know who was behind me, if it was the sailors, the scientists and all that, but some guy was saying the Lord's Prayer. Another guy was saying, oh my God, we're all gonna die. I knew we were in trouble because we were right in the middle of that cloud. And I looked over my head, it was above us, it was beside us, and it was behind us. But after that Bravo bomb went off, I did say, my God, and that's the first one? I said, what have we got to look forward to? And it was absolutely reversed. The worst was our first one. That one bomb alone would incinerate 80 million people. And we knew they made a miscalculation.
Inicialmente, pensou-se que a explosão tinha sido 2,5 vezes mais intensa do que se esperava e provocado muito mais chuva radioativa e danos do que os cientistas tinham previsto à partida.
This is something that most people don't realize or the positions we took, and so I did these sketches. We were always faced away from the blast. Our faces were in our folded arms and between our legs. And then the heat was, you know, just got more and more intense, you know, and you're thinking, when is this gonna stop? You could see the cloud, and it was drifting to the left and towards the fantail, but you could just see it going downstream. Then after we kind of milled around for a while and noticed that cloud moving, the guy came in the back and with a Geiger counter. And he's, you know, all of a sudden he was clicking away, you know, and I was enjoying the thing, you know. It's just a beautiful thing to see. In fact, at that time you could see these veils of coral coming down out of the sky, coral and all kinds of debris, probably dead fish, whatever, everything vaporized. But it was just like just a beautiful setting, you know, coming down.
Well, you see a major thunderstorm and all the boiling of the clouds, and you know, and it gets kind of frightening. Okay, that's nothing. This thing was hundreds of times bigger than that, except it even had the most magnificent colors in the world. You wouldn't believe it. It just goes, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you think, where's it going to stop?
Then we were told that now we had something else to look forward to, 2 shock waves. One of the shock wave was in the ocean, the other was in the air, so we got a double hit on that. Any sailor knows when you're in rough seas, you point the bow toward the rough seas, you know, go sideways. That thing pushed the whole ship, a ship that sideways about 100 yards, and then it started tilting.
I thought we were going to capsize and go under, to be honest about it. But when it tilted back the other way and we didn't sink, and it kind of rocked back and forth like a cork.
And the shock wave appeared as just a dark line going across from horizon to horizon. Actually, it was like if you dropped a stone in a pond or something, it would, you know, create the little wave that goes in a circular wave that would go around. It was like a veil or a curtain that came at us very swiftly.
That old ship just shuddered like this, you know. Some of the guys were pretty frightened. Most of us, it was kind of exciting, you know, to see something like that, something that not everybody gets to see.
I've seen sound waves before, and you could watch it coming across the water, and you knew when, as soon as it hit the ship, everything that was closed, like a can, it would have that, it almost sounded like the whole ship went like this.
And when it hits the ship, it sounds like a coffee can with some rocks in it, and you shake it real hard, and it is frightening. And then shortly thereafter is the sound. But by then, I was petrified. And I started praying then. I'd already started praying, but you know, I was really, really concerned, because, you know, you hear that ship and it's moaning and groaning, and I think, well, this sucker's old. I'm not sure it's going to stand up. That was my first thoughts after seeing the first blast.
A dimensão enorme do teste Bravo resultou numa vasta contaminação radiológica, e a chuva radioativa afetou os Marines no navio e os habitantes das ilhas próximas.
I felt like I was going to get shoved off the side of the ship. We were much closer to that blast than I would have ever believed they were going to put us. We were not behind a bunker like the people in Nevada did for their tests. We were out on the deck of the ship.
I knew that it was so big that it sort of froze the world at that point. If you just had any sense of proportion at all, from what you normally think of explosive powers is eerie, because it starts out silent. It starts out where the shockwave hasn't gotten to you yet.
I don't think even the scientists knew the amount of the volume that Castle Bravo was going to give us. That thing was beautiful, and that's the only thing I can say. The colors in the clouds, they're gorgeous, and you can't fathom the fact that it's so damn dangerous, but yet be so beautiful.
Bikini Atoll was gone, and we went to other little islands around that area.
When we got over there and first got there, they were building a big concrete bunker so they could film the shot going off, and then when we came back in, that whole island was completely gone. So we figured something went awry, that it was a lot more powerful than they thought it was going to be.
And there appeared to be a big crater, and rumors are, and I think even some facts are, that you could stack 3 Pentagon buildings in the crater.
Projeto liderado pelo Dr. Greg Spriggs, físico da área de design nuclear do Laboratório Nacional Lawrence Livermore, na Califórnia, propôs-se analisar até 9.000 bobinas de películas desclassificadas para estudar o impacto das explosões nucleares.
We spend a great deal of time studying these shots. We are never going to do another atmospheric test ever. So the data that we have is it. That's all we're ever going to see. We were trying to develop expertise in nuclear weapon effects. And so we were always being asked the question, if we were to detonate this weapon on this particular target, what would be the fallout? What would be the consequence of execution? On the Operation Bravo, they actually had these tracker planes that were designed to actually follow the mushroom cloud. And so when they measured it, they found out that the cloud had gone up about 114,000 feet. So it's about 22 miles up.
We were told by the scientists aboard ship that they were up there gathering data. There were big planes, and they were actually labs collecting data. And then you'd see these planes, these little teeny planes flying around it.
It was a really unusual airplane. Swept back wings, I'd never seen anything like it before. It was really sleek, like one of our modern planes. And then that pilot had to fly through the cloud at a certain elevation. And then each one of these filters, apparently they were going up and down, or they were traversing this way, were to measure radiation as the plane went through the cloud.
Concluiu-se que a quantidade significativa de contaminação radioativa imprevista provocada pelo teste Castle Bravo foi propiciada pelas condições climáticas e por alterações nos ventos.
And that cloud kind of chased us down the Pacific, and they shut everything down. I think we were shut down for 3 days. Well, there was a lot of running around on the decks and everything else because they had no idea of the intensity of the fallout.
Fallout came and we turned around, it was right there, like, it was almost like in a snowstorm.
We were all ordered below decks, and all the hatches were shut down, and the sprinklers were turned on. And the idea was to wash down the fallout.
Usando tecnologia digital, o Dr. Spriggs conseguiu analisar as imagens com uma precisão muito maior do que a das medições iniciais das explosões no Oceano Pacífico, que foram incorretas na altura.
One of the objectives, I think, of our project was to preserve this and to actually have a record, a historical record, so that people can look at these films and just realize if everybody understands just how horrific these weapons are, nobody will use them. These films are really important to us from a scientific standpoint. They contain all the original data. Then the scientific data that was recorded on those films can be reanalyzed, but it can be done in a much more accurate way than could be done back in the 1950s. A lot of things had to be discovered from the time that we started this fusion process, and we didn't know exactly how to calculate it. So they did their best back in the 1950s based on the information that they had, and obviously there's some of the information was not quite correct, and they ended up getting yields that were bigger than what they expected. On Bravo, they had adjusted the analysis somewhat to account for this. Turns out that they also made another mistake. When you do a shot over water, as the shock wave moves out, it picks up water off of the surface and it makes the shock wave heavier. So we think now that the yield of Bravo, in fact, the yield of all of these barge shots that were done in the Pacific, are probably about 27 to 50% higher than what was originally reported. So Bravo, instead of being 15 megatons, might actually have been on the order of 22 megatons. When this detonation occurred, this fireball was about 3.5 miles in diameter. This was a big fireball.
O incidente foi o pior desastre radiológico jamais registado na história dos Estados Unidos e motivou protestos a nível mundial contra os testes nucleares atmosféricos. Devido a esta pressão, em 1963, ambos os lados aceitaram deixar de fazer testes na atmosfera.
According to a declassified map, we were 23 miles away. We were the closest ship to the blast.
They placed us under the cloud on purpose to see if this worked. And also, the cloud went in the wrong direction. It went over populated areas, which caused a lot of problems. The fallout, they thought it was snow. They'd heard about snow all that. I've never seen it, and this looked like snow, so they started playing in it. Instead of being cold, it was burning.
I have a little disappointment that we were deliberately exposed to the radiation, and that really gets to me. You know, it took them 50 years to open the records and admitted all the illnesses and things that I've come down with bothers me. So for me to have this many problems and for them to come on to me the way they do, I very strongly feel it's because of the radiation. Getting us that close to the explosion when it happened, that's just plain ridiculous.
Durante muitos anos, o Departamento dos Veteranos defendeu indenizações e benefícios nos cuidados de saúde para auxiliar os veteranos atómicos afetados pela explosão. Os ilhéus locais também continuaram a apresentar problemas de saúde graves.
I think it's very important that we get closure from the government because we've got some people that are really hurt bad from this. Radiation affects different bodies differently. I mean, there's no way of telling how it's going to affect you. And some people have died horrible deaths. And the Veterans Administration denies most of our claims because it never happened. It doesn't exist. The records that they show that they were altered and changed to make it look like nothing happened when in fact it did happen.
A lot of people still don't know anything about it. I mean, in particular, if you go to the Veterans Affairs or the Veterans Hospitals, there aren't many of them that know about atomic Marines or atomic veterans. And because we were unable to disclose what we saw for so many years, it's all forgotten. So we are a beginning again by the claims that we file to help the military men that were over there and didn't get a damn thing for it.
O governo dos Estados Unidos acabou por desclassificar os testes nucleares clandestinos realizados durante a Guerra Fria. Os Marines do Curtis e dos elementos da Marinha com os quais serviram passaram a ser mais conhecidos.
I just think that we had a lot more awesome responsibility than we realized at our time. We felt that as Marines, that was our duty, and we just did our duty, and we would guard our post, and if anybody ever tried to come on that post, we were ready to die for that, to make sure that nobody got in there.
Thought about it probably for the first maybe couple years after I got out of the service. And then all when you forgot about it. You know, it never even entered your mind anymore until things were declassified and they contacted me about a reunion.
And that's why we're so tight now as a group. We didn't know if we were still being monitored. We knew we were still tied down, and we signed those papers, the Rosenberg Act. Kind of makes you quiet. Then the Freedom of Information Act, we started getting more facts. It was kind of fun to find out what really happened. On Operation Castle, there was 8 bombs scheduled, but nothing like that Bravo shot.
No total, os homens por detrás da Operação Castelo desencadearam 6 explosões nucleares diferentes naquela que ficou conhecida como a Zona de Testes do Pacífico durante a primavera de 1954.
When they did the second test, you know, it was, I don't remember, 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, I was concerned. I think all of us was. But you know, we never sat down and discussed it amongst ourselves. Okay, we just didn't talk about it. But when that second blast, and we knew it was big, okay, but we knew it wasn't as big as the first one. The first one had lots of repercussions that we didn't have with the second one.
Years later, we went back into the ship's registry. We weren't even on the ship's registry. We did not exist. And then it was after, I guess, the documents were declassified and everything, somebody checked again, and there we were.
It's one of the finest group of men I have ever worked with. I was given a chance to see total devastation. It really is scary. You had this all bottled up inside of you, and then pretty soon I started talking myself into thinking, don't say anything, just forget it, block it out. Relatives and friends were curious what I did and where I was, and I said, I can't tell you. But, you know, we were programmed for that. In talking at the reunion, a lot of the fellas just tried very hard to forget it. We were tight because we were a small unit to begin with. We covered each other's tail. It's a bond we have with each other. We love each other very much.
I will say that the group that I belong to, those Curtis Marines, are terrific people. I really enjoy them. I've really enjoyed these meetings, and they've given us information that has helped us.
I think the brass, the Atomic Energy Commission, and our high-ranking officers, I think they learned a lesson on Bravo.
Boy, is this overkill? What are they trying to keep? Yeah.
We went through an awful lot, and of course, there wasn't a lot of acknowledgement about the things we did. And we can talk about it freely, and we can exchange ideas, and we can help each other get claims if individuals need them. But it's something that our country owes them for the duty they did during the Cold War.
Os Marines atómicos existentes sobreviveram para contar a sua história. E quando as suas missões foram oficialmente desclassificadas, começaram a encontrar-se de novo e a partilhar os seus segredos bem guardados pela primeira vez.
There were a lot of people involved in preventing World War III, if you will. And today, you know, did we do something good or bad? You can, in one respect, say, you know, maybe we shouldn't have done it all. Look at all the countries that are out there trying to build bombs and whatever, and at what point in time are we going to see these big flashes in the sky again? Hopefully never.
When I talk to people about it, they understand. People my age, younger people don't understand because they don't remember the Cold War. But people my age now understand what to do and why it was done. and they remember Nagasaki and Hiroshima, what happened there, and what if it wouldn't have been done, what we'd have been on the other side of it.
Russia saw what we had, we saw what they had, and it became a standoff. The first big blast we did, it was 1,000 times bigger than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 1,000 times, okay? That's a big sucker.
If these people who are sitting around wanting a piece of us would see what the devastation of these type of weapons will do, and like I say, now they're more sophisticated. What are you going to do with something that you can't occupy? I just hope it never comes to it.
What we saw is somewhat minuscule compared to the weapons we have now. And that's what scares us as atomic veterans. We saw what devastation it can do.
It was a terrible game but without it, probably we wouldn't have had the SALT agreements, the strategic arms limitation agreements and treaties. There were reasonable men at that time who saw that, it was futile. The problem now is you've got men who are basically fanatics who aren't reasonable men. And their idea is to bring about Armageddon to us. And that's the worst scenario. And that's why we don't want to see it again. That's why we have to stop.
You don't want to go to war. If you've seen what these bombs can do, you definitely don't want to go to war. I mean, they wipe out so many people, and they show no mercy.
I don't think any other country, if they saw the result, if they were where we were and saw the result of the detonation, they would not even be trying to develop.
And by maintaining a strong nuclear deterrent, we hope that if these people recognize just how horrific these weapons are, that they will have second thoughts about ever using it, realizing that there's going to be a retaliation. In the blink of an eye, you can kill millions of people, especially with these weapons. When we, at the end of World War II, when we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those were relatively small weapons. They were on the order of 20 kilotons. Now we're talking about weapons that are on the order of 20 megatons, much, much bigger. And we hope that the people in the public understand that. And if we were to be bombed and we had to defend ourselves by dropping nuclear weapons, we would hope that the enemy would take this into account and have second thoughts about bombing us. This would be very devastating to mankind.
I'm concerned, and have been every time there's a threat of nuclear warfare again. Because those of us that were on the curse, and a lot of people that were involved with the testing of nuclear warfare, remember and know how devastating it can be.
It changed the whole tone. We won the game. And that's the way we really, really looked at it. And I think that's part of the pride that the guys could keep quiet the way we did all these years. And we really felt, how could anybody be stupid enough to go up against us when we've got a weapon like that? I mean, the guy'd have to be suicidal, absolutely. Did we know everything that happened? No, but visually we sure did.
We're finding out now that the young generation knows nothing about our experience. It's ancient history. I can look back on my life now with a new way of looking at it. I think every one of us feel that way, that, we did something important and we're still important. As far as the bomb is concerned, we've seen what it can do, and we don't want to ever see that again.